Hello, Philip Sloan there in Los Angeles this evening. Nice to talk with you.
How did you get my number? Oh, hi, Nick. Nice to talk with you.
Yes, I found it on the net. Some ex-girlfriend posted it there.
I see. Yeah, if I had a nickel for every ex-girlfriend. Okay.
Anyway, let's start. It's the start. Let's do the James Lipton thing. Now, you were born in New York to an American father and a Romanian mother. Is that correct?
That's what they tell me.
And so was it a musical upbringing? Was there music around the house? What got you interested in music in the first place there, Phil?
I think originally it was the Platters and Elvis Presley.
So what, you were listening to the radio?
No, I was too young. My sister was 6 years older than I was. She had a record player and, teenage girls. And they were playing their music. No, I didn't grow up in a musical environment. Yeah, nobody was involved in music. My father was a professional man, a pharmacist, so I was expected to go into that line of work.
And your sister, she ended up getting a normal job or doing the normal things?
Yeah, boring and normal, but adequate.
So you were listening at a young age to music. What drove you to, were you thinking about playing your own music? Were you thinking about writing your own music at this time?
Oh, Nick, what I've discovered is that the impetus except for people like Beethoven, I'm sure, and Mozart, the impetus to get into music was basically to win the heart of a young maiden. I was a very young lad of about, say about around 8 or 9, and I was in love with this girl, and I thought that, if I could play guitar and sing a song for her, she'd notice me.
The Paul Anka syndrome there.
Well, yeah, we're all singing I'm Just a Lonely Boy, right?
Were you successful with a girl?
No. I found out later that women are basically interested in security, and musicians can't supply that. No.
They still go for musicians, though?
They do in their youth. As soon as their youth is over, they look for the lawyer.
Well, they're smart, the other sex.
Uh-huh.
Smarter than us, perhaps.
Well, they say that women use 7 parts of their brain, that men only use 4. So the old adage, of Harry Belafonte, oh yes, the woman is smart, it just unfortunately happens to be true.
He was right. And their language skills are especially advanced compared to the male as well, so...
Yeah, and they can think in 4 directions at the same time. That's why you can't win an argument, because they can think past, present, and future, where most of us are just tied into the present. They're thinking, 6 months from now, you may have thought you've won, but 6 months from now, you're going to lose this. See, they're able to think in time zones unknown to men.
I know exactly what you mean there, Phil. But in the meantime, when you were 12, you got signed up to Aladdin Records. So between, the age of 6 and 12, were you already writing your songs and playing your guitar? There must have been some sort of professional...
Yes, I was. I had I think the main cataclysm of my life at that moment was meeting Elvis Presley personally in a record store, and he taught me how to play guitar. And I was about 12 years old, and from that experience, meeting Elvis and him teaching me how to play Love Me Tender on the guitar, it was just natural for me to audition at an all-black blues label and get signed to them.
How did you manage to meet Elvis Presley in a record shop? Just a little question there.
Just a divine little play, I suppose, He was in town having his guitar fixed at a record store, Wallace Music City, and they had closed off the store, and I had a guitar in my hand. My father just bought me one, and I was trying to learn how to tune the strings, and so they thought that I was with Elvis, and they let me into the store, and that's where I met Elvis.
Is this in New York?
This was in Los Angeles, yeah, on Sunset and Vine. There was this tremendous record store. It was the only place in town where you could actually go in and get an album or a 45 and then go into your own private record booth and listen before you bought it. Sort of like test driving your own records. Unfortunately, with someone like me at that time, the 6 records that I brought into the booth, I only came out with 3. 3 were in my pants.
Smart man. I hope you didn't get caught.
by God, I had to get caught because I had to learn the consequences of stealing. But up until that time, that's how I basically listened to music. From what we could pilfer from the record store. Eventually, I did get caught. And they let me off with a slap on the wrist. So, I learned from that fear what it's like, and I went on the straight and narrow ever after.
So you did your sister, wasn't she out of the house so you could go and use her record player? Or she was home all the time?
Oh, no. I mean, did you ever know of a teenage girl that would let you use anything of hers?
Yes, okay, you got me there, okay. Now, I have a son and daughter, and yes, I understand completely. Now, so were you writing songs? Well, obviously you were writing songs before Aladdin Records, who were probably...
No, I was writing poems. And, I was just harmonizing on a broken one-string ukulele to Everly Brothers records. When I auditioned for Aladdin, I sang, coincidentally, an Elvis Presley song, and they said to me, "Hey, kid, do you write songs?" And I said, "No," and they said, "Well, go home and write, and then, bring them in, and we'll record you." So, I began writing, that afternoon.
Yes, and Aladdin even released a single, All I Want Is Loving and Little Girl in the Cabin, which are your songs?
They were, yes,
Yeah.
and Elvis, for some unknown reason, sent his background singers, the Blossoms, and Mike Deasy to play guitar on the session. Bumps Blackwell was the producer, and he was Little Richard's and Sam Cooke's record producer, so he knew Elvis, and, there was that kind of small little world. Now that I think about it, how's a 12-year-old kid, recording a record with Little Richard and Sam Cooke's producer? On an all-black label, no less, But, God only knows.
So what did your parents think of this, you going into a recording studio? Did they say, young Phil, stay away from the music, get a job in the pharmacy, or what was their opinion of things?
My God, Nick, you could have written the script. That's exactly what they said.
Well, I have similar parents, I think, back when I was young. A business degree or nothing.
Exactly. I mean, they have a psychological name for it now. It's called garbage can kids. In other words, we were lower middle class, struggling to be, middle class, and basically, the role of the parents was to tell you that you'll never amount to anything, and you're just inherently a loser, and you're stupid, and it's known as garbage can syndrome. Oh yeah, I mean, look at the United States Congress; it's just filled with garbage can kids.
Yes, dear oh dear. But anyway, Phil, so what came next? Because you were signed up to Screen Gems, you met Lou Adler. So the little Aladdin thing was one off, and I've got here that there's a single in 1960 for the Mart label, another label I haven't heard.
That was owned by Doris Day's husband, Marty Melcher, and...
Father of Terry.
Father of Terry. I got signed to them, and... coincidentally, that had a connection to Jan and Dean. Arwen Music and Daywin Music was connected to Marty Melcher in some way, and so there was a Jan and Dean Terry Melcher connection happening at that time, and I was like 14.
So you got in with Jan and Dean, and at that time, I think Lou Adler managed them. And is this when you meet Steve Barry?
Yes, I was still going to high school. I kept auditioning, going up to Screen Gems every day after school with a huge tape recorder, and would sit on the couch for 6 months, and finally the secretary took pity on me, and she said, it breaks my heart to see you, sit here on the couch for 3 hours every day, never getting to meet anyone. So she made an appointment, and I played my songs for Lou Adler. I had him on a tape recorder, about 150 songs that I'd written. And lo and behold, Lou Adler did not like me at all. But the owner of the company, Al Nevin, if anybody knows any history, Al Nevins and Don Kirshner owned Alden Music, which was the parent company of Screen Gems. And Al Nevins, bless his soul, really liked my music and signed me for a whopping $10 a week.
Would have been a reasonable salary back then, or not?
That's the equivalent of $400,000 a week now.
Wow. That sounds a bit exaggerated, but I take your word for it. So, well, you'd been busy and determined, the fact that you'd written 150 songs and the fact that you were waiting there for 6 months until the secretary. So obviously you were a very determined young man.
Apparently. I mean, I don't think that you really can consider yourself a musician, until you gain some sort of acceptance. But so I don't think that I think that I was driven to, for someone to say, hey, you're a musician. You really don't have to become a pharmacist.
You're mixing and you're in that environment and...
You can do all the drugs you want. You can do all the drugs you want later.
Once you've got a bit of money to afford them.
Right.
Let's go on to... So you and Steve start writing, or are you put together? Are you?
Yeah, I was a young kid, 16, and Steve was, I think, something like 20, 21, 22, married, and he was up there shopping a single. They didn't like the single, but they thought he might have had some talent as a songwriter, and they threw him in the room that I was in, and they said to us, "You two will write together," and that's what that was about.
Was Don Kirshner trying to do another Brill building in L.A. or something?
Yeah, I think he had Carole King and Jerry Goffin, Barry Mann, and Cynthia Weil, Neil Sedaka, and Greenfield, So yeah, I think they were into partnerships as songwriters.
And in LA you had Philip and Stephen, Sheridan Hollenbeck, the Wildcats, familiar names?
The Lifeguard, the Trashmen, the Fantastic Baggies, the
Yes.
Grassroots. I'm leaving out about six other group names. Basically, what they did is we would write a song, go in and record it, and then they'd sell it to a record label. And they sold me under 12 different names.
With the Fantastic Baggies, they even let you record an album, yourself and Steve.
That's correct. We were singing background for Jan and Dean, and the reason we got the gig was because the earlier group who sang on Surf City, called the Matadors, demanded that they get paid.
Oh, dear. Foolish men.
Foolish men, and so they were gotten rid of, and okay, well, let's use this 16-year-old kid and his friend Steve. We don't have to worry about paying them. So yeah, it was hundreds of hours of hard work with just minimal tuna sandwiches. But the joy of doing music with really good artists was, that's something money can't buy.
Were you still at school then, Phil?
Yes, I was.
Did you have any time to do any homework? School homework, that is.
I breezed through high school. I breezed through it with mostly B's. I actually passed Spanish. I passed my Spanish class by singing La Bamba for the school teacher. So she said, if you sing La Bamba for the class, I'll give you a passing grade. That was the only problem I had, was Spanish. Who would know that the state that I'm living in now would be completely Spanish?
Well, I lived in Los Angeles for 4 years, Phil, and I just remember the bank teller machines. And when you put your card in, the first thing you'd get is you want English or Espanol. I realised at that point that this is at least 50-50 here in California, 50% English speaking and 50% Spanish speaking.
That's right. So I'm grateful that I didn't study Polish or Latin. So it's serving me well.
Now, the Fantastic Baggies weren't a hit, but Round Robin was your first...
Au contraire, the Fantastic Baggies were a hit.
Oh, they were a hit,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, they were the big seller in New Zealand and Australia and Hawaii and Seattle. And yeah, Tell 'Em I'm Surfing was fairly successful. And, that was pretty much the first taste of acceptability.
You would have got a few pat on the backs and the ego would have been a little bit larger because of your hits?
Indubitably, the ego gets larger, but at this point in your career, what you're looking for is confidence. When ego takes over from confidence, then you're in big trouble. At this point, what you're really looking for is to grow musically, and you need confidence to do that, when you're, 17, 18 years old.
You need confidence in yourself and your musical abilities as well? Were you always confident of your musical abilities?
Overconfident. So I mean, you really needed some, some straight straight confidence, you know.
Phil, when did the time come for you to start recording your own albums? Because by this time, by 1965, when you recorded your first album, you'd already written a lot of songs, and as we mentioned, you wrote hit songs as well. Was there always in the back of your mind that, look, I want to sing my own songs? How did that process come about?
Well, very briefly, I told you that, you know, I used to pilfer records, you know, from the music stores, but we actually took it a step further. We actually printed up phony letters and would go to the record labels saying that we're from our school and that we'd like you know, all your albums for our dance. And that worked for a while, and I was about 15, 16, and I got my first at Columbia Records. They sent me over to a trash barrel, and in the trash barrel was the first two Bob Dylan albums, Pete Seeger, Marian Anderson, I think, and just, it was the first taste I ever had of folk music. I was listening to folk music while I was writing surf music, and something opened up inside me. I turned 18, 19, and all of a sudden my consciousness was growing, and
you were maturing.
Yeah, exactly. And I started writing these songs on my own, Eva Destruction, Sins of a Family, Take Me for What I'm Worth, etc., brought them into the record label, played them for the record people, and they said, you know, we will not publish this, you know, stop writing this kind of stuff and go back to writing songs with your partner. And I didn't want to do that. You know, I just felt compelled to write my own music. You know, at that point, Barry McGuire had left the Christie Minstrels and was looking for songs. And he went to the publishing company I was in, and they played him all the Carole King songs and the Barry Mann songs. And he said, no, that's not what I'm looking for. And they said, well, there's a kid down the hall who's written some crazy songs you might want to hear. And I played him a song called What's Exactly the Matter with Me, and he loved it and said, I want to record this. So that's how that happened.
So basically, Barry having a huge hit with Eve of Destruction, that sent you on another level. Would I be right in saying that, Phil?
Oh, it was... Nick, it was an eye-opener. Yeah, I mean, I was coming from a somewhat American naive point of view, you know, sort of like, you're the new generation, we want to know what you have to say. And I gave them that, and they said, you're a communist, you're a fiend, you're a Marxist, you're a terrorist. And the entire world split in half. Just a 20-year-old kid saying what he thinks is wrong and what could be right, all of a sudden finds that, hey, the world is split in half. There are people who think that I'm a communist and a terrorist, and there are those that think that I'm telling the truth. And it was an eye-opener. That's all I can tell you. It was amazing.
Well, it's still a bit like that, especially now with that Arizona assassination.
Yes, I know, but I mean, at this time, you know, it was pretty well hidden, I guess, from... you know, maybe just from my naive point of view, you know? I mean, Kennedy was just assassinated, right? So, I mean, the dark days were coming in, you know, but when you're 19 and 20, you don't really want to think that, you know, that the world is going to go dark on you. You know, you think, you know, life is going to be bright and beautiful, right?
I suppose you're a bit insulated there in the studio, too busy writing your songs.
There is that, you know. For the first time ever, I'm out all over the world, you know, talking and meeting people, and finding out that there is a group of people that are extremely concerned about the state of politics and the state of the world. I was an insulated kid straight out of high school.
Well, as you know, we had Barry on the show, and he claimed that there was a conspiracy against that song afterwards. It had already broken too big for the radio station, but Barry claims that after Eve of Destruction, they put a can on his songs. They wouldn't play them, or they wouldn't play them as much.
Oh, well, yeah. Isn't he a lovely soul?
Yeah, he was lovely to talk to, and we still email a bit.
Yeah. No, the story goes like this. Sins of a Family came out at the same time as Eve of Destruction, and Eve of Destruction was banned from all radio. Sins of a Family was banned from the air. Radio Caroline in England, you know, the rock boat off the shore, started playing Eve of Destruction, and it started climbing the charts in England, and so some brave radio stations began playing it. At the time that the record really broke against being banned, Billboard was getting death threats from the right wing, saying that this is communist propaganda, and they'll kill everyone at Billboard magazine if they put the record on the charts. So Billboard called up Dunhill and they said, "Look, we cannot put another Barry McGuire record on the charts, or PF Sloan for that matter." That's the story. That's how it went. There was that much anger directed at me and at that song.
I wonder if it was the same in Australia, because it was a big hit here as well, but I don't know anything about the political ramifications of playing that song here in Australia, because in 1965 Australia was a lot further away from the United States and the rest of the world than it is today, you know, with all the internet and all that communication. So, but I know it was a hit here. And these people, the spokesman came out. Now, who were they? With the dawn of correction. They wanted to correct the eve of destruction. Do you know anything about them?
Yes, I do. Yeah, of course. Well, you know, briefly, it was the right-wing conservative answer to Eve of Destruction, saying, you know, this is a great land, and if you don't like it, leave it. You know, Eve was basically, you know, had something to do with the, you know, the changing of the American Constitution. You know, changing the law from. So, I mean, you know, this, you know, the whole idea, you know, that you can't speak out, you know, about, you know, integration, or you're old enough to kill but not for voting. I mean, you know, this might have been like the first kind of song that, you know, was opening up a dialogue rather than saying what Bob Dylan had said, you know, how many cannonballs must fly, you know. It was less abstract and more conversational.
Well, you know, here we are in 2011 now, and I was a bit young for that.
Well,
listening.
Maybe you are, Nick. I'm still in 1973.
Well, look, I quite like 1973.
So here we are at 2011. Okay, yes.
But
I'm with you, Nick. I'm with you.
What I'm trying to say there, Phil, is that I found the Dawn of Correction and Eve of Destruction, and you put the two side by side, and I got to tell you, I'm not trying to flatter you or anything, the reason why Eve of Destruction is so good, sung so good, is because Barry has more passion than the spokesman. He sounds as if he really, really believes it. He really goes for it, whereas the spokesman, Blandsville. But that's just me.
Yes, and, you know...
And not taking anything else into consideration.
Right. Well, I appreciate your thought on the matter. You know, I don't know whether Barry told you the story of, you know, basically Barry, as a joke, likes to say that the reason he sounds like he's so passionate is because nobody at the record label wanted to record Eve of Destruction. It was the fourth song on the date, and there was only 10 minutes to record it. So Barry had to sing it very fast.
He told us that story. Yeah, he was running late, and he had to sing it fast, and that's why it's so impassioned.
Exactly, yeah. But he believed everything. He still does to this day.
Phil, let's get on to your solo albums, and you released the first one, Songs of Our Times. So, for instance, Eve of Destruction is on that album. So had Barry already released his version by the time the album came out? And also Barry sang The Sins of the Family. So were you after, were you at the same time, or were you before? If you get
Destruction, the version that I did was before we cut it. As I said, the publisher did not like any of my songs. Barry liked What's Exactly the Matter with Me. That was the B-side of Eve of Destruction. That was supposed to be the A-side of the record. So the demo that I made of Eve of Destruction went on to my album. But I originally played the song for Barry in the office, and he wasn't particularly drawn to it either, you know. But he did like Sins of a Family. The publishing company hated that song and censored it, you know.
They'd censor everything back then.
Well, they censored the word liquor. They forced me to use the words the father was getting sicker. So it was censored and then banned. He was sicker
with the liquor.
Exactly.
Phil, just to get off the plot a bit, it's got here on the internet that you're a PF Sloan, Philip Flip. So is that just a shortening of Philip?
No. Actually, my middle name is Faith. My sister, bless her soul, she's passed away a couple of years ago. She gave me the nickname Flip. It worked for me when I was 13. It doesn't anymore. So, I mean, I had my middle name changed to Faith.
She wasn't a Flip Wilson fan, was she?
She was, but this was before Flip Wilson.
So when Dunhill released Songs of Our Times, your first album, so how did it do? Were they happy with it? Because obviously you got to release another album with Dunhill 12 more times, so obviously they were. Just to answer my own question.
No, obviously they weren't.
They weren't?
No, the real story was that Sins of a Family hit the charts the first week out, and then Dunhill pulled it. They pulled the record so that it was no longer available. They pulled the record album as well.
Why did they? I mean, you changed Sick of Liquor. I mean, didn't that keep them satisfied?
Yeah. What they didn't want, what the publishing company did not want, was a PF Sloan who was a successful record artist, because they felt that if this kid gets a taste of success as a record artist, he's definitely going to ask for more money. So they basically wanted to kill any chance that there might be that he'd be a successful record artist. But what they found out was that the album became a demo album for other artists.
So they could listen to the songs and do their own versions.
Exactly. That's why they commissioned a second album. And when From a Distance came out from the second album and began to become a hit as well, they pulled that out. They stopped producing that and pulled that from the stores and used the second album again as a demo album.
One of my favourite PF Sloan songs is This Precious Time, which is on that album, and also the man behind The Red Balloon, which we had Noel Harrison, I think I emailed you, had Noel Harrison on the show, and he loved that song, and I'm not exactly sure how he came to it, but he loved it, and he recorded it as a single as well.
Yes, the backside of that was Marique, I believe.
Yes, Marique, the Jacques Brel number.
Yes.
I think, yeah. So what I'm basically trying to get at, Phil, is even though Dunhill didn't want you to become successful, you had a lot of musicians, your peers, let's call them, recording your songs, so you were getting a lot of respect from that end of the industry. Would I be correct in saying that?
Yes, you would. Yes, and that's exactly what the publishing company wanted.
Now, of course, we had your chum Frank Howson on the show, and he mentioned that you produced Ann-Margret for an album, or was it just a bunch of songs?
No, it was actually a couple of singles.
In that case, what, did Ann-Margret come to you, or did her record company come to you, or how did...
No,
was it
no, Lou Adler was doing Ann-Margret.
Uh-huh.
And he was doing Ann-Margret, and
Phil, I get you.
You could take that any way you want, and you'd be right. And so he asked me to write songs and produce it, and he was the executive producer.
Okay. This is before Roger.
Yes.
Oh, good. Good. Now, Phil, after your first two albums, you left the company, or because, look, I've read here on the internet that they played hardball, they put you in legal limbo or something. I'm not exactly sure, but Measure for Pleasure was the next album, but that's on another record company. So how did you get the new deal, or can you tell us a little bit about that, Phil?
Well, I had to leave Los Angeles under threat of death from the record label, and I drove across the country, moved into Greenwich Village, and began performing at the Bitter End and the Cafe Go-Go. Got signed by Sid Bernstein, who was the Young Rascals manager and the guy who brought the Beatles to Shea Stadium. He brought me over to Atlantic, and they signed me, and wound up doing an album with Steve Cropper and Tom Dowd, who produces Aretha Franklin. And unfortunately, I was not mentally very well. I was, 22, I think, 22, and had lost all my connections with family and friends in Los Angeles, and I wasn't a very happy puppy. Managed to do an album.
The Dunhill years took it out of you, did they?
Yes, all three of them. All three.
Yeah. It doesn't take much, though, does it?
No, it doesn't. I mean, if you saw the Beatles documentary, you realize in those days you had to come up with 6 singles and 2 albums a year. I was working with 8 or 10 different artists that I needed to come up with 6 singles and 2 albums for each of them. So, yeah. I mean, I'm working, 24 hours a day. And
for the first Grassroots album, you and Steve were the Grassroots.
Yes, and, that's another mouth to feed, in terms of songs and production and singing and stuff.
Were you happy with the final outcome of Measure for Pleasure?
No, I can't say I've ever been happy with any album I've done.
There's a bit of a gap. You did Raised on Records, and were you still writing songs? What were you doing in the intervening years, Phil? Were you still writing songs? Were you still active in music, or?
No, it only been 7 years, since Eve of Destruction, and I still had hopes of being on a good record label, being taken care of. That wasn't to materialize, and I sort of deconstructed after 1972. I began to realize that there just isn't going to be anyone who's going to treat you well. And at that point, I just started deconstructing PF Sloan.
In what manner?
Piece by piece.
Are you still active and writing songs, enjoying things? Are you enjoying your back catalogue?
Nick, let me tell your listeners, I'm very, very happy. I've been studying with my Sadhguru in India for the last 20 years. I'm very, very happy. I'm very creative. I was working with Frank Howson on a film project, wrote some songs for that, which are, to be quite honest, some of the best songs I've written.
Well, Frank agrees with you there, Phil.
Yeah, I'm blessed with good health, good looks, and
you lucky thing.
And very, very happy with my existence in this world. So every twist has its turn, and it's all good for the lessons and the learning. The music is worth it all. That's what the bottom line is.
Well, that's what lasts long after you're dead.
You're driving a Volkswagen one day and a Cadillac the next day. They're both cars. Yeah. They're both going to get where you want to go.
The name of the film, Remembering Nigel, did you have to write to order for Frank, or did you have songs? Can you tell us a little bit about that process?
Well, Frank has given me an opportunity to do something I haven't ever done before, and that's to write film score music, and I really heartily enjoyed that. I've been working on an opera, which I don't want to go into at this point because it's very personal, but it's a project I've been working on for 14 years. It's a very wonderful symphony pop expression of my creative talents, and Frank came in with this project just at the time I've been working on the piano exclusively and got to express some of that creativity in the film. So really a nice match.
I can't wait to see the film. I haven't seen it yet, but Frank says it's doing the festival circuit. If he came knocking again, you'd do it again, do another film?
Absolutely, but I'm hoping to pay off some of my dental bills when he sells the distribution rights to Nigel.
Fair enough. Look, I know dentists are very, very expensive, even here in Australia.
Yeah, we don't have healthcare service here, man.
Oh, no, Phil, we might have healthcare, but dentists aren't included, which is a real bummer, let me tell you.
I see. Okay, so you can understand. Yeah, that's kind of like it is. Dentistry is a whole other thing.
Anyway, Phil, we're going to leave it there. Look, I want to thank you very much for taking time to talk with us. It's been a pleasure.
Well, the pleasure's been all mine, and let me send my love and good wishes to everyone in Queensland and Brisbane. Special shout out to Frank Howson. We love you, and we want to see Remembering Nigel get a distribution deal and make a lot of people happy because it's a brilliant picture.